Hello and welcome to Volume 99 of Capital Ideas Live. In today's issue, we'll discuss the unintended consequence of certification programs and how to improve them. We'll also discuss the benefits of a voluntary wildlife certification program. And we'll get some tips on forest taxation, and we'll find out more about a notification requirement for loggers that has been passed by the Alabama legislature recently. I'm Hayes Brown, the General Counsel of the Alabama Forest Owners Association, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. We're pleased to have Tom Saunders, who's the General Counsel and Director of Government Affairs for the Alabama Forestry Association. Hello, Tom.
Hey, Hayes. How you doing?
Tom, I know the legislature's in session now, and you're closely following that, working this week on that. One of the bills we wanted to talk to you about was the county notification bill, which I think has been passed by both houses. Has it been signed by the governor? Is it expected to?
It has been, and it is now Act number 2012-257.
Okay, very good. Please tell me why the bill was written in the first place, and then we'll talk about how it's supposed to work. Tell us why.
Well, we've been working on this over the last couple of years. Prior to our beginning work on it, about 18 counties had adopted what we refer to as logging ordinances, which ranged across the universe of simple notification requirements to permits with bond requirements. And our fear was that we were going to have 67 different ways of conducting logging activities on the county's right-of-ways throughout the state. So we wanted a statewide notification system.
Okay, so it gives a little bit of uniformity when it comes to using county roads, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, tell us how the bill causes us to change the way we're doing things now.
Well, what will happen is the counties that previously had a permit requirement, those are repealed now through this law. So if they're going to have one, they have to go back and pass a new ordinance at the county level, and that ordinance can only include certain components that are consistent with notification. You know, who's going to be conducting the logging activities, where are they going to access the right-of-way, how they intend to get their product to market. What we hope this will do is give the counties advance notice of logging activities, and that way the logger and the county engineer can get together and work on the best way to conduct their business activities without doing any damage to the county right away.
Okay. Now, is this something that the landowner is supposed to do, or is it a logging contract?
It's actually driven by the timber owner. So if a landowner has sold his timber to a dealer, it's the dealer's responsibility to do it. We do have some landowners, big institutional landowners in the state, that conduct their own logging activities, and in those cases they would be required to do it. But by and large, the mom and pop, if you would, sells their timber to a third party who then manages the harvesting operation, and it's that third party that's responsible.
Can you give me an idea of the context of this? In other words, are there other industries like coal mining industries or whatever that are required to do these sorts of things?
Well, actually, that was one of our major complaints with these logging ordinances being passed by the counties. They were singling out our industry, and they were not requiring it of other industries. However, we wanted to work with the counties to try to come to a mutual agreement on how to do this without it getting too onerous, before it got too onerous, I'd say.
Okay.
So we were willing to kind of trade off on the notification system in order to get this.
More of a proactive approach. It establishes some uniformity and allows the counties to know if they're going to pass an ordinance what things need to be in it.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tom. We appreciate that.
Anytime.
Our next guest is Reed Watson. He is from the Political Economy Research Center, or PERC, and he's recently written an article in Forest Landowners about some of the unintended consequences of forest certification. Welcome, Reed.
Thank you very much.
Reed, how can forest certification threaten forest owners, in your view?
Well, for many landowners, certification is an opportunity for recognition of good stewardship. But for others, certification can actually limit access to the marketplace. You see, a few years back, there were several large retailers and buyer groups were pressured by environmental NGOs to begin purchasing only certified wood products. And if you're a forest landowner and you're a good steward of your property but can't afford certification, you just lost a bunch of potential buyers. You might not be able to sell your uncertified products at all, or you might have to sell them at a steep discount. So the bottom line is, as forest ownership becomes less profitable for uncertified landowners, we can expect to see an increase in the conversion of forest lands from forest lands to developed uses.
Okay. Well, you've mentioned that it might be less profitable for uncertified owners. There is an issue of affordability in certification. What are some of the costs?
Well, there's several groups, actually. There's kind of indirect costs of certification, and this is what the landowner spends to comply with the certification standards. And these are going to vary depending upon what standards are being enforced and what the landowner's management practices look like. So how much it costs for them to meet the certification requirements. The second category are direct costs of certification, and these go to the certifying agency. They cover the actual cost of the certification process, and these also vary by program, ranging from no cost for American Tree Farm certification to as much as $5,000 per landowner for certification by the Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC. Forest landowner might be able to justify spending $5,000 on certification if he or she earned a price premium for selling certified products, but no significant price premium has been observed. Remember, the demand for certification came from the environmental lobby and not from wood product consumers. So it's not surprising that we've just not observed a financial premium or a financial benefit for certification that would have offset these certification costs.
Is there a way to improve certification so that it can help forest landowners?
I think so, but there needs to be a recognition by these large retailers and buyer groups that most forest landowners are good stewards, whether they've gone through a particular certification process or not. If you think about it, land is their livelihood, so forest landowners have an obvious incentive to take care of it. Requiring costly certification, such as FSC, could actually increase forest conversion because of the gap between the costs and benefits for many forest landowners. If these retailers and buyer groups are going to require certification, they should perhaps consider a cheaper option, such as the American Tree Farm certification, which would accomplish comparable environmental protections, but at a fraction of the cost to the actual private forest landowners.
Okay. Well, thank you, Reed. We appreciate that.
Glad to be here.
The Quality Deer Management Association has developed a different type of certification program for wildlife enthusiasts. It's a voluntary program, and it's designed to develop a higher quality product and one that could actually increase the value of your land. Matt Ross can tell us more. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Hayes.
You're here to promote the QDMA's new land certification program. What is this program all about, and how could it benefit people?
Sure, I'd love to tell your listeners all about it. And more hunters pursue whitetails than any other species out there. And since the inception of the QDMA back in 1988, there are more landowners out there practicing some form of deer management on their properties. We've had many members come to us looking for some type of advice, asking for us to have an individual professional come visit their property and give them recommendations on what they're doing and how they can improve their situation in terms of managing their deer and other wildlife on their property. So we developed this program. We unveiled it last year at our national convention, and it's in full launch this year. As you mentioned, it's voluntary, but it's a fantastic three-step process. There are 3 different levels, and it fits the standards and different situations for landowners from Maine all the way down to Texas. And listeners there in Alabama would be pleased to see what we have available. And it's really based on a foundation of good habitat management. In fact, to even get certified, you need to have a forest management plan either developed or already enlisted on your property. So we see that as the foundation of this program. But above and beyond that, what the listener would get from this program is an inspector to come look at their property and help them through the process of how they're managing their deer herd. And we'll also recognize individuals that are doing a really good job. We give a sign out similar to other recognition programs for forestry, and they should be proud to display it.
Let me ask you about the inspectors. What's the process for selecting, for becoming a program inspector?
We have specific eligibility requirements for our inspectors, and we're holding training sessions right now throughout the country. An individual that has an academic degree in some natural resource field, wildlife, forest management, and 2 years of experience practicing that field can come. Also, on top of that, we hold a series of workshops, multi-day workshops. We just had one in Andalusia this past weekend. And the person that's a layman that attends one of those workshops and becomes certified, what we call as a deer steward, they learn how to write and implement their own property-specific deer management plan. So if somebody doesn't have the academic background but comes to those courses and actually puts that management on the ground for at least 3 years, they can also come.
All right. Well, there's more information on the website next to your image, Matt. Thank you for joining us and telling us about that program.
Yeah, thank you very much. Right there on QDMA.com.
That's it. All right. Well, one of the issues that forest landowners face is succession planning. That's how to pass along not only the land, but also a love of the land. Lamar Dewberry has given this some thought and has developed his own innovative ideas to do this. Welcome, Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Glad to be here today.
We heard you have developed a family blog. Can you tell me why you took time to do this?
Well, the main reason that we did that really twofold. One is family and the other one is education. For its family, it's a way to keep the family in touch with what we're doing. As far as when they're away, live in another state, they're able to see what we're doing with our management plan. And on the education side, it's to educate the public about a multiple-use forest.
Okay. Now, did you have any help in setting up this blog? Is something that you already knew how to do or what?
I just got started on Google Blogspot. It's a user-friendly site, and it has worked very well for me, but there are other blog spots available like WordPress and LiveJournal, and any of these would work to do a blog on your family forest.
How do you think it's benefited your family?
Well, it goes back to sharing with our property with our family. They're able to see what's going on the property, even though they can't be here with us sometimes. My son lives in another state, and it gives them the opportunity to see what we're doing and give them an attachment to the property, even though they're away several hundreds of miles from the property. Others can use the site maybe to get ideas how they might use their forest land, and I guess you could say it's an electronic forestry tour.
All right. There's an image on in visiting your blog. You can do that. Tell me what kind of things you would see if you joined this blog. You have some photos and some information on it?
I do. I try to provide information when we're doing specific management on the property. Also, I try to make pictures of wildlife and wildflowers on the property. And just the other day, I added a picture of a tree frog that I had found in a tree and how he blended in with a tree, just to give the public out there that doesn't understand and know what goes on out there in the forest. You know, we see a forest, but we don't see the minute parts of the forest, and that's what we try to do, is to provide an opportunity to people learn about the forest more in depth.
Does this take a lot of your time? Is it something that you have to think about doing, or is it kind of an easy, unintentional kind of thing?
It's not that hard. I try to keep a camera with me quite often, and I use that camera every time I see something I think that would be good to share on our blog. I make that picture, and then I put the picture, upload the picture onto my blog spot, and doesn't take but probably 5 minutes to get it up, and we can share with others.
All right. Well, thanks, Lamar. I appreciate you sharing that.
We thank you for the time.
Jim Solicito joins us from New York State and has experience with catching trespassers, whose images he's caught on his game cameras. Jim, I saw a photo of you holding a Chinook salmon. It's a record Chinook salmon, and I know you enjoy fishing. Do you like catching trespassers as much as you like catching fish?
Absolutely. The key with both of them is really preparing ahead of time and making sure you know how to go after your quarry. What I do is I put up a bunch of signs, and a camera, a good trail cam is going to cost you between $250 and $450. So my rule of thumb is I put 5 to 7 signs up for every camera that I have out. And the signs are very simple. They're metal. They cost about $18. They look like a no parking sign might be at a street any place. And they say, camera surveillance, we prosecute. Camera surveillance, we prosecute. And I put them at all visual access points around the property. Once you have this out, you're starting to build the legend of, geez, is somebody out there? Is there a camera out there? What's going on? So you're putting the thought in the mind of the potential trespasser, and most of the time they're a poacher, that, jeepers, if I show up on that property, I might get caught.
Well, once you catch an image of a trespasser on your property, do you practice catch and release?
If you practice catch and release, you're going to catch that fish a bunch of times, but you're going to catch that trespasser about once, and then he's going to smarten up, and he'll figure out how to outsmart you. So, no, you must follow through. And it's very critical, very important that you prepare your case for trial. You go right to you don't fool around. You go right to whether it be the sheriff or the state troopers or whoever, and you have that person arrested. They're going to beg, they're going to plead. It's the first time they've ever done anything like this. They didn't see the posted signs, and in the article that I wrote for QDMA magazine, this particular trespasser drove through no less than 9 signs to get to where he was in the middle of my forest. Once you catch them, you prosecute them, though, and you're going to have to show up in court. Don't think that the sheriff is going to follow up, because they're not going to. They're going to issue that ticket, and then you need to follow up in court. And more importantly, you have to practice the 6P philosophy. And whether it's for fishing or you're catching people on your property or just about anything else in life, the 6P philosophy is proper planning prevents pretty poor performance. And before I went to court in this particular case, I sent the judge aerial photographs, sent them my land management plan, showed them pictures of the damage, actually had a detailed cost, and when it came time that the perpetrator came up before the judge, it was $1,100. It was cut and dried. They paid. They were fingerprinted. They received a ticket, and I hope I don't see this guy again.
So just to be clear, you're not suggesting people use a self-help remedy and detain these trespassers, but you're turning this over to law enforcement.
Absolutely. I don't want to fool around with anybody in the woods, particularly if they're an armed nature observer. What I'm looking to do is let my cameras do the work, and I set my cameras low, particularly in the off-season, about the height you'd want them for spotting turkeys, not the higher height for deer. And I set them at different angles through the forest, so if somebody's driving up, I want to picture their license plate. I never met this individual. I just turned everything over to the local sheriff, and they handle it from there. The last thing I want to do is a confrontation. I got a wife and daughters who'd really like to have me come home for supper just about every night.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim. We appreciate that. Good information. Roger Simmons is founder of Advanced Technical Training Network, and it's an online school that helps its members with preventative maintenance and repair of small engines. Hello, Roger.
Hello.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and what prompted you to set up Advanced Technical Training Network.
Okay. Well, I was 25 years with Steel Incorporated. I was the head of engineering quality services, and in those different departments, one of them was technical service training, and then another 15 years with Husqvarna doing the same thing in technical training and all the engineering testing and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I recognized was there's a real need for factory-level training that the factories give to their exclusive dealers that a lot of companies, like landscape companies and different places, don't have access to that level of training, and a lot of times just the little technical tips and tidbits that help make a repair process go so much smoother and easier.
Okay. What does ATTN offer that can help you maintain those small engines that are all around the place in the shop and at the camp house and the garage and so forth?
Well, we recognized early on that everybody learns differently. Some people like to have a written script in front of them, a repair procedure, if you will, like a service bulletin, and they're very comfortable with that. And then we also have people that like to have a video of actually shows them what to do, hands-on doing it. And some people prefer to have both, and so we offer both, and in all different procedures to repair the product.
How do we get started using your services?
Go to www.advancedttn.com, and it'll prompt in go to the join, and it'll prompt you through that.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, Roger. We appreciate that.
All right.
Thanks a lot. Bill Siegel's a returning guest to Capital Ideas Live, and his experience in tax law has helped many thousands of forest landowners who wanted to get his thoughts on tax topics for the year 2012. Hello, Bill.
Good to be with you again, Hayes.
Is it possible to save taxes by making timber sales this year as opposed to next year?
Possibly. Mm-hmm. There's a possibility of significant federal income tax changes for 2013. So unless you have faith in Congress that they will retain the current Bush-era tax law, which expires at the end of this year, most of the provisions of that law, yes, it would probably behoove most timber owners, if they're thinking of a timber sale, to do it this year to lock in the lower capital gains rates that may expire at the end of this year. Currently, there are two capital gains rates on timber sales, 15% and 0%, and both of those are set to expire at the end of this year, unless Congress extends them. Next year, the zero rate will expire. The top or the basic capital gain rate next year will be 20%, and for some timber owners, as high as 25%. Now, what will Congress do? We don't know. So, yes, it would behoove timber owners to make a sale this year to assure themselves of the lower capital gains rates on that timber income.
Okay. Is there some advantage to gifting some forest land to your children this year as opposed to next year?
Yes, there is, and we're talking about fairly large forest estates now, because the federal gift tax law this year allows an exemption of $5 million, actually $5.12 million, and that is set to be lowered to $1 million next year, unless Congress extends the $5 million. And of course, most timber owners who make gifts do it to lock in the lower valuations, as timberland and the timber itself may increase in value over the years, so they gift to lock in the lower valuations that are currently in place. So that can be done up to $5 million for an exemption for the gift tax this year. That will be lowered to $1 million next year unless Congress extends the $5 million.
Okay. And when should we be looking at trying to find out if Congress makes these changes to extend the current law as opposed to letting it revert back to the less favorable law? Do these things take place at the end of the year sometimes?
Right. Well, we have an election, of course, in November, a presidential election, and nothing's going to be done in Congress before then, and it's very problematic whether anything will be done in the lame duck Congress after the election before the end of this year. Your guess is as good as mine. I would say probably very little. What will probably happen is that Congress will take a look at the Bush-era tax cuts that have expired at the end of this year, and if any of them are extended, it'll probably be done retroactively, which has been done before.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Bill, for that tip. We appreciate that. Kris Williams is in our markets chair to talk about tax deferral strategies called like-kind exchanges, and we wanted to pose a hypothetical question to him to illustrate this concept. Hello, Kris.
Hello, Hayes. How are you doing today?
All right, you ready for your question?
I'm ready.
Okay. Let me get you to assume that there's a forest owner that has timber land. He has zero basis in the timber, and the land is worth about $10,000, and he's going to do a clear cut of the track, and he's expected to make $200,000. So he's going to have a gain if he doesn't do something. Now, what he'd like to do is use some of the money to reforest that track, and then the rest of it he wants to purchase another tract of land to continue what he's doing. Would he be eligible for this thing called like-kind exchanges?
Yes, he would be eligible. In your example, there are several different things going on. First of all, we have a taxpayer that is planning to make a taxable sale one way or another. Refer back to what Bill just said. He's wanting to do that in this year, which, could potentially save some taxes, and he's planning to reinvest in timberland anyway. So what we have here is the possibility for a like-kind exchange. If he is going to sell the timber anyway, as long as he's not tied to the investment in that land, he could sell the standing timber on the land, use those proceeds in a like-kind exchange to reinvest in a new tract of timber or a new tract of timber land, or a new tract of raw land even. And then with the potential tax savings, which at 15% for federal would be, $30,000. Alabama here, you're looking at around 5%, which would be another 10. Could use that $40,000 in tax savings to reforest that new tract of timber and end up having saved $40,000 in the whole transaction.
Okay. Well, let's suppose he wants to do this like-kind exchange and he finds the replacement property, which is raw land ready to be planted. What are his options if the owner of that replacement property doesn't want to make an exchange directly with him?
Okay. That touches a little bit on what most people find to be confusing about like-kind exchanges. Typically, when you talk about a like-kind exchange, you think of a property swap, meaning that I am property owner 1 and I want to switch my property with property owner 2, which might happen and is certainly possible under the like-kind exchange rules. But a lot of times, property owner number 2 is selling his property, and he's not interested in property owner number 1's property. So you
can't make a one-to-one swap at that point. You have to, yeah.
Right. So that's where a qualified intermediary comes in. A qualified intermediary is typically an attorney or someone that will act as kind of like an escrow agent that will hold your property that is sold, hold those proceeds from the sale of your property, purchase the new property that you want, and then sell that property to you effectively. So whereas you, property owner 1 and 2, can't exchange property through the intermediary, property owner 1 can get property number 2, and the like-kind exchange will work.
Okay. Well, that sounds like it would make it a lot easier to identify replacement property using that qualified intermediary. But let me ask you this. What if your timing is not completely synced up so that you haven't found the replacement property yet, but you're going to have to go ahead and sell the property that you've got or the deal's going to fall through? Are you still able to do this thing?
Yes, you are still able to do that if you're using a qualified intermediary, and provided that you're following all the rules, right? We need to say up front that the like-kind exchange, when you're talking property for property, there are certain rules. Real property has to be exchanged for real property. You can actually do this with personal property as well, meaning if you wanted to exchange a bulldozer for a bulldozer, you could do that as well. But as far as the timing goes, you do not have to do the exchange simultaneously. Say you have a piece of property that you're looking to purchase, and you've potentially talked with the owner of that property, and they said, I would like to sell this property, but not now. I'm going to sell it in a few months. That's okay. As long as you're using the intermediary, you can sell your property. You have 45 days in which you have to identify potential replacement property, and then you can have up to 180 days to actually close on that second property.
And you can identify more than one within the 45 days, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
you can identify more than one. You can actually identify up to 3 under the safe harbor rules, or you could even do more than 3, but the rules become a little bit more complicated from that point.
Okay. So identify within 45 days, purchase within 180 days. Okay.
That's right. Hayes, you can also do that exchange backwards. You could do a reverse. You could purchase the replacement first and then sell your property that you're relinquishing later. That's called a reverse exchange.
All right. That sounds good. Well, thanks, Kris. We appreciate that information. That's good. And that's all the time we have for this issue. Our thanks go to Tom Saunders, Reed Watson, Matt Ross, and Lamar Dewberry. And we also appreciate the contributions of Jim Solicito, Roger Simmons, Bill Siegel, and Kris Williams. A speaker at last month's annual meeting, Dr. John Hall, reminded us that many of our most cherished facts about forestry are actually myths. He was referring to the pristine myth that Native Americans did not alter the landscape but lived in perfect harmony with their surroundings. Turns out that's not true. They did alter the landscape in very noticeable ways to serve their own ends. Another idea we're taught is the idea of the urban encroachment. It's the idea that our cities are expanding at such a rate that they're consuming the landscape. With apologies to Joan Baez, this should be examined a little bit more closely. Turns out that according to a program at the History Channel called American Stats, that 99% of Americans live on 8% of the land. So perhaps this explains the vast areas of uninhabited land that still exist in the United States. Myths or facts? It's always good to question the party line. On behalf of the Alabama Forest Owners Association, I'm Hayes Brown, thanking you for joining us for this issue of Capital Ideas Live.